Hello, everybody. It's Christian. Welcome back. Thank you for watching my series so far. I know it's going to be a long series. It's a lot to unpack, but still, I thank you so much for watching. We're looking at 7 red flags that apply to fitness influencers regarding nutrition. I kind of cut Eddie Abbew short on the second red flag last time. So, again, this is going to be a long video, so I don't want to drag this out too much. But Eddie essentially argues that the only fruits that you should eat are berries. And he's very anti-fruit except for berries for some reason. The dad disagrees with him on that, and I'll put all these studies in the description and a brief summary of those studies if you want to check those out. So that discusses part 2. Sorry, red flag 2, rather. Again, I apologize if this is kind of lo-fi. Like, I'm not a professional at this. I'm doing the best I can. So, we're going to move on to red flag number 3. The third red flag is when somebody criticizes processed food with no context or nuance. What I mean by this is that if an influencer criticizes if an influencer criticizes processed food but gives no context or nuance for that, that's a red flag. Let me explain this a little bit more. Come on here. All right. Now, I want to be very clear about this. I know somebody's going to straw man this in the comment section. I am not saying eating processed food is a good idea. I am not saying that. I am not saying that eating cookies, donuts, Twinkies, or blatantly unhealthy food like that, I am not saying eating junk food's healthy. I am not saying that at all. Let's be clear about this. If somebody's eating cookies, Pop-Tarts, Twinkies, high-calorie soda, I am not going to consider that a healthy diet. Nobody will consider that healthy. So let's be clear. You should cut back on heavily processed food. It's a good idea to reduce it. All right? However, I think a lot of these fitness influencers go way too far when they talk about heavily processed food. All right? They often give the impression that eating even small amount of heavily processed food is harmful. That's not the case. Eating large amounts of heavily processed food is bad for you, obviously. But eating small amounts of heavily processed food is not harmful for you. All right? And we'll look at a case study to prove this. So, the third red flag is when an influencer demonizes all processed food as being inherently unhealthy. These influencers go around and say, if you eat anything from a package, you're a bad person. This red flag applies to Paul, Eddie, and Mario, albeit to differing degrees. So, more specifically, Paul, Eddie, and Mario have dismissed protein powders and protein bars as being inherently unhealthy due to the fact that they're processed. Now, to be fair, protein bars and protein powders, they come from whey, which comes from milk. So they are in fact from a natural source. The hyper natural people get mad when you point that out, but protein supplementation comes from milk, which is a natural source. So it's not that processed, first of all. But what I want to focus on is moderation when it comes to processed food in general. All right? Paul, Eddie, and Mario give this impression that if you eat one small amount of processed food, you're inherently unhealthy and you're a bad person. And case studies disagree with them on this. Small amounts of processed food is fine. Large amounts is not fine. Small amounts are fine. How do we know this? Well, consider the Twinkie diet. There was a certain professor called Mark Haub. I hope I'm saying that right. H-A-U-B, Haub. Mark Haub is a professor of nutrition and health at Kansas State University. Mark Haub went on this Twinkie diet. You might have heard of it. In 2010, Haub went on a Twinkie diet for 10 weeks. During this Twinkie diet, 2/3 of his diet came from heavily processed food. This heavily processed food included Twinkies, donuts, Doritos, Oreos, and other blatantly unhealthy foods. So, 2/3 of his diet came from heavily processed food. One third of the Twinkie diet, in fact, came from healthy food. Think like fruits, vegetables, protein drinks, and yes, protein drinks are healthy despite of what these influencers like to tell you. Anyway, for the Twinkie diet, 2/3 was from heavily processed food, 1/3 was from healthy food. What happened? Well, after those 10 weeks, Mark Haub lost 27 pounds. All right? He lost 27 pounds. His bad cholesterol decreased by 20%. His good cholesterol increased by 20%. Haub's body fat dropped from 33.4% to 24.9%. This means that he went from being obese to a healthy body fat percentage over the course of the 10-week Twinkie diet. Now, some of you are saying, how the heck could that be? Haub ate 2/3 of his diet from heavily processed food, but he lost weight? His good cholesterol went up? His bad cholesterol went down? How could that happen? The answer? Calorie deficit. Because you see, Haub ate in a calorie deficit. Haub ate fewer calories than necessary to maintain his body weight. So, he ate a diet. So Haub ate a diet that people would consider as unhealthy. Yet, because he ate fewer calories than he burned off, he ended up losing weight and becoming healthier as a result. All right? Think about this. 2/3 of his diet was from blatantly unhealthy food. 2/3 of his diet came from heavily processed junk food. Yet, he burned more calories than he ate, so he ate fewer calories. He lost weight because he was burning more calories. Therefore, he became healthier. What does this mean? What this means is that if you burn more calories than you eat, you're going to lose weight. Mark Haub's Twinkie diet shows this. All right? It's not rocket science. If you burn more calories than you eat, you're going to lose weight. Calories in, calories out is true. All right? The other thing this shows you is that if you eat heavily processed food, but you still burn more calories than you eat, you're going to lose weight and your health will get better. Now, I am not in any way saying you should eat heavily processed food like this. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that if you eat a generally healthy diet, you have a little amount of heavily processed food, and you're not eating too much, you are fine. Moderation is the key here. All right? That's important. Moderation. All right? If you eat a small amount of heavily processed food, it is not going to hurt you. And I think Haub's Twinkie diet shows this. Small amounts of heavily processed food is not harmful for you. Eating too much heavily processed food is bad for you. That's a takeaway. All right? So that's why I'm not a fan of Paul, Eddie, and Mario harping on heavily processed food all the time. Their attitude is pretty much, don't ever eat heavily processed food, and if you eat heavily processed food, you're a bad person. That's their attitude, and I don't agree with that at all. I think it's better to say eating small amounts of heavily processed food is fine, just don't do it all the time. All right? Just don't eat too much heavily processed food would be a better strategy. But you see, they have to exaggerate to you to get views. Because they know if you say eating small amounts of junk food's fine, that's not going to get views. They have to exaggerate and say, don't eat heavily processed food at all, and if you do, you're a bad person. That's the problem. All right? Now, one last thing I should point out here. Now, I know I said I was going to save the hypocrisy moment for later on in the video, but Mario specifically is a hypocrite on heavily processed food. All right, and I need to call him out on this. Mario dismisses all heavily processed food as being unhealthy. Mario even goes as far as to say that protein drinks, protein powders, protein bars are inherently unhealthy because they are processed. However, Mario recommends eating candy before a workout. Wait a minute, you're saying? So he's not okay with eating protein supplements because they're processed, but he's okay with eating heavily processed candy before a workout? That seems a little hypocritical. You're right, because it is. So, when you consider that Mario is a hypocrite who doesn't even practice what he preaches regarding processed food, yeah, that tanks his credibility a lot. Another thing is that Mario, in one of his own videos, which I'll show you in the description by the way, goes to Chipotle to eat after a workout. And Chipotle's food has GMOs. GMOs are, processed. So Mario goes around and says, you should not eat processed protein supplementation. But yet he argues that you should eat candy before a workout, which is heavily processed. And Mario himself eats heavily processed Chipotle after a workout. So Mario doesn't even practice what he preaches, which is extremely hypocritical, and that really kills his credibility. So there. So, simply put, the third red flag is when an influencer demonizes heavily processed food as being unhealthy, but gives you no context or nuance behind it. This certainly applies to Abbew, Paul Saladino, and Mario Rios. The Twinkie diet that I discussed shows you that if you eat small amounts of heavily processed food, it is not hurtful to your health. If you eat too much heavily processed food, yes, that is harmful. And like I said, I do not advise eating a crap load of heavily processed food. I don't recommend that. But if you eat an occasional cookie, an occasional donut, an occasional Pop-Tart, don't stress about it. You are fine. All right? So, I'm going to end it here. Thank you for watching. All right? Up next, we're going to go, I want to say this is going to be part 5 coming up. Holy cow. So, in part 5, we're going to talk about the fourth red flag. The fourth red flag is demonizing protein supplementation. And I'll discuss why influencers who demonize protein supplementation are wrong. All right? Thank you for watching and have a good day. I appreciate you watching my video series and I hope you feel better soon. Have a good day. Goodbye.